Okay, here we go. I'm going to be going through just some of the more noteworthy beanies that I happen to have, showing off what kind of things you might want to look for if you happen to have the Gen 4 or 5 tags. Before I talk about the ones that are actually kind of worth something, let me bring up a few that aren't worth as much, that usually show up in these kind of lists and surprisingly didn't in this one. So here's a good set that gets misrepresented quite a bit, and you'll have to excuse the not great video quality on this. I don't really have a good setup for it. So this is Iggy and Rainbow, and let me just kind of show a little bit kind of what's going on here. So these two are both called Rainbow. They both have a hood on the back of their neck. And these two are both called Iggy. They both have the felt spine on the back. The reason why they're weird colors and why one of the ones called Rainbow is not actually rainbow colored is just because of a mix-up. The original versions were these two, sometimes referred to as Rainbow with Iggy's fabric and Iggy with Rainbow's fabric. And some places will claim that these are tag mix-ups and that they can be worth a lot. They're not. It's a fairly common error, and there's actually another version of this one specifically that has a tongue also. Neither the wrong ones or the right ones are really worth very much. And speaking of errors that aren't really worth much, here's my collection of Millennium bears. Another one that surprisingly didn't show up on the list. The reason I have 4 of these is because there are very minor variations with them. This is how the tag is basically supposed to be, with 2 ends. And here is, which one is it? Yeah, here's, it's a little bit dirty, but here's one that's wrong, that has only 1 N. And there's a version, I think it's this one here, not that you can tell because it's in a protector, but there is a version that has 1 tag, the tush tag is correct, but the hang tag is wrong. And then there's the one where both are wrong, the one where both are right. And then there's the last version where they're both right, that has a different ribbon than the other ones do. This is the original ribbon. It has a glittery texture to it. And this is the newer ribbon, which is kind of more ribbed, I guess you would call it. Here's the 2 side by side. So it did go through different variations. You'll see a lot of people mention that the one with the typo is worth a lot. It's not. All the Millenniums are worth $5, sometimes even less than that. So moving on from those, also really briefly, here's just showing this because I happen to have it. Here's a beanie that actually is rare. Unfortunately, mine is in really bad condition. It's pretty worn down and dirty. But this is Chilly the polar bear. You can tell that it has a older generation tush tag. This is the Gen 1. It's also really faded. This was a lucky find of mine, but not so lucky to where it's actually worth anything. I'd say this beanie is not even really worth $1. I don't know. There might be somebody who wants it, but like I said, there are certain beanies that are rare. You just kind of have to know which ones they are, and hopefully have them in good condition, because that makes a really big difference. But even aside from that, here's a good comparison. I swear I don't have multiples of all these. Here's a bunch of Tusk, the walrus, that I have, and the reason I have 3 of these is I have one that's normal, one that has an error, and this one is a Gen 3. I don't have very many of these, but it just kind of goes to show, the tag does make a really big difference. Like I mentioned before, Gen 3s aren't worth a huge amount, but they do definitely go more than the later ones. If this was in perfect condition, which it wasn't, it might be worth close to $50, but also has a Gen 2 tush tag just for the sake of showing what that looks like. There's the front, there's the back. But yeah, you don't usually find these in thrift stores, just kind of like out in the wild. If you do, snag them up because they're not all that common and they might be worth something. But most of the time, you're going to be finding later ones. And like I said, the reason I have two of these is because one of them has an error. They're both Gen 4 hang tags, but this one, I'll open it up to show it off. This one actually printed the name as Tuck instead of Tusk. There's a few errors like that. I went over the last video like over and over how errors aren't worth anything. They sometimes can be. It's kind of, you kind of just have to learn which ones are and which ones aren't. Anything that's like a minor spelling error, like I said, with on the back, like this one is spelled correctly, but you have the surface wash. Sometimes it would say sufis. Sometimes the original here would be original with two I's. Not on this version, but on the Gen 5 tag. And here is, does one of these have it? One of the other beanies I have will have it. I'll show it in a minute. But there's like other errors. Those are usually ignorable. The ones that actually misspelled the beanie's name are more noteworthy because it's a more major error. So you have this one. I think I got my Tuck for about like 25 bucks. There's also Flash the Dolphin can be called Fiash, and Chocolate the Moose can have a tush tag that says Chocolate. Those don't show up very often, so it's hard to really give a price for them, but they're worth looking out for. And the reason I have Tusk here is because I mentioned back with when I was talking about Bubbles the fish earlier, there are some early Gen 4 beanies that are kinda worth a little bit more than the others, but not a whole lot, and Tusk is one of those just because it's a very early retiree. The other ones in that group that I have right here are Tabasco the Bull, note the red paws, not the white ones like Snort has. Here is Chops the Lamb. This Chops actually has the original Gen 4 hang tag with the CE on the back. Most of them don't have that. Not really something worth looking out for that much, but it is somewhat noteworthy. And where is the, here we go. Here's one with the typo. Tabasco has it. If it'll focus in here. Come on. Focus. Please. There we go. Suffrus washable. A lot of the early Gen 4s will have that. It's, once again, not really worth looking out for. If you have that, it just kind of indicates it's an older Gen 4, but nobody really pays extra for those. So I have those two. Then there's Coral the tie-dye fish. There is Kiwi the toucan. And this one's also kind of interesting because I have a version where the website on the bottom is covered up with a sticker. They did that really early on because they actually didn't have the rights to the tie.com domain yet. They printed them kind of prematurely, and so there was like some trouble with getting it because of a company called TechYard that had the domain, and so they had to basically do this very briefly. That's kind of interesting. Some people will pay extra for those. Here is Sting the Stingray. And then we have, let me move these out of the way real quick. Have the American Trio, Lefty and Righty, the Donkey and the Elephant. Both of them have a U.S. flag on them. And then Liberty, the bear. This was the first of many like country exclusive bears. And I'm going to open up the tag protector on this one real quick here just to show this. Liberty can sometimes have a clear connector instead of the red one. It's not really a price difference, but it does exist. The birthday on this one doesn't give like a specific month or day. It just says summer 1996. The rare version of this will say Summer Olympics 1996, and the Liberty in the first part of the poem will be capitalized. So you kind of want to look out for that one. It does cost a little bit more usually. And I actually have another one over here that is in a plastic case. It's authenticated. It's like the, I'm not going to be able to show this because of the camera angle really, but it's been graded by Becky, one of the experts in the actual group that I'm talking about. But yeah, this one has a misspelling on the tush tag. There is no way I'm going to be able to show this due to the camera angle, but it'll say the B9 Babies Collection. It's not a major error, but it does exist. So, like I said, Liberty is one where there's kind of a few extra things to look out for. I'll put this tag protector on later. And just because I feel like it, here's a size comparison between the regular one and the Beanie Buddy. They are a lot bigger. The tags sometimes will be different with like this rainbow star. They also went through generations. And the inside of the tag will always say Beanie Buddies Collection. It'll have trivia about the original Beanie Baby, which is sometimes wrong for the record. And the tush tag is a totally different kind of material. It'll also say Beanie Buddies. A lot of times, people who don't know the product will have these bigger ones, and they'll have something based off of a beanie that's actually really valuable, like Royal Blue Peanut, for instance, and they'll think they have something really great, but you have to know the difference. The tags will always say what you have. And again, just for comparison, same beanie, but this is the McDonald's teeny beanie version. You've got the small, the medium, and the large. The buddies are very rarely worth anything. The teenies pretty much never are. Actually, I don't even know why I said pretty much. They just never are, period. But the regular sized ones can be. So here is just kind of going through some other ones that are mid-range. These usually don't go for more than like $5. We have Radar the Bat, Flash the Dolphin, which, like I said, can sometimes be spelled Fiash, but that's pretty rare. Splash the Whale or Orca. Then we have Sparky the Dalmatian. This one has white with spots, ears, and tail. There's another version of this one called Dottie with those are black instead. Sparky is the rarer of the two, but like I said, still doesn't usually sell for a whole lot. Here is Manny the Manatee. This, that price tag is not what I paid for it. It came like that. Just kind of goes to show that prices have gone down a lot since the old days, where Manny would have been worth $55. Now it's worth like $5. And I actually do have another Manny with a Gen 5 tag, just for comparison. And yeah, this one's also the Gen 2 tush. And then we have Digger the Crab. There is an orange version of Digger that's worth a lot more than the red one. It's for Gen 1 through 3. What other from that set? Here we go. There's Grunt the Razorback, or Boar, whatever you want to call it. It's kind of similar to Tabasco, different animal though. And here is Garcia the Bear, which is similar to Peace. It just doesn't have the emblem on it. Is that all of them? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Who am I missing? There's another one. Oh yeah, Bubbles the Fish. So yeah, these 9 were the ones that retired May 11th, 1997. The ones I showed earlier were from January 1st, 1997. So a little bit rarer than other Gen 4s, but not by a massive amount. So now let's show some variants, because these ones are also, these ones are, this is where you're actually starting to get into ones that can be kind of worth a bit. We'll start with the one that's probably worth the least. Here is Bongo the Monkey. The fabric colors on these are slightly different, but that's not actually the point of interest. That would be the tail. This one has a tan tail, which matches the color of like the feet and the face. This one's brown tail, which is just the same color as the rest of the body. Brown tail version worth more. This one can be found with either a Gen 3 or 4 tag. The tan tail can also be found with 3, 4, or 5. Brown tail sells for more, but it's usually not a massive amount. I got mine for super cheap, so I actually don't know how much they usually go for, but if you have a Bongo, check which tail it has. If it's brown, then you're kind of lucky. I forgot about this one. Sorry, I'll have to splice it in. But there's also Sly the Fox has 2 different versions. Can you spot the difference? It's pretty simple. Brown version is the original. White came later. Brown version was only out for about 2 months, and then they switched to this one. It's another one of those cases like the brown-tailed bongo, where it doesn't usually sell for a whole lot, but it's still definitely the rarer of the two. White belly sly, not really worth more than like $3 to $5, but brown belly you can get maybe 20 or 30 for it, so worth looking out for. Then we have, this one took me forever to find one. We have Inch the inchworm, and at first glance they look basically identical. The difference is with the antennae. I'll hold it against my hand for comparison here. So the common version is made out of, if it'll focus, made out of yarn, has like a little knot at the end. The rare version is made out of felt, just like a flat piece kind of shaped like a lollipop. The felt version is actually more common, I believe, as a Gen 3. It wasn't printed for very, or like this one wasn't made very long for the Gen 4 tag, so something worth looking for with that. Then we've got, everything's getting buried, I've got so many taken out here. Lucky the Ladybug. On the left, this is what we call the 11 spot version. It's not actually always 11, it depends on where the fabric's cut, but it just kind of has roughly that many spots on it. And this is the 21 spot version, same thing, not an exact number, but you can see pretty clearly the difference there. 21 spot version did not run for very long, so it is definitely more valuable. There's another one called the 7 spot, where they're made of felt and glued onto the back instead of part of the fabric. That is Gen 3 and earlier only, so I actually don't have that one. But yeah, I'll keep an eye out for 21 version. And I think, oh yeah, here's a pretty major one actually. I've got 3 of these. Let me grab them out. So Tank the Armadillo. Here is the common version of it. Oh, and let me show this. This is a Canadian tush tag. A lot of people ask about these. If it has 2 of these tags and one of them's all black and white like this, that just means it was released in Canada. You can maybe sometimes find someone who will pay a couple more dollars for them, but they're not really rare. Yeah, this is the common version of Tank that has like a defined shell shape on it. Here is the version with no shell, with 9 lines on it. And here, in an authenticated case, because I couldn't find one without, is the no shell version with 7 lines on it. It is a very, very slight difference between these two, but it is a difference that people take into consideration. The 7-line version, and let me rotate it so you can see the tag. 7-line version started as a Gen 3 and very, very briefly ran as a Gen 4 before it switched over. The 9-line version, it's hard to really pinpoint because there's no good documentation on this, but I think it ran for maybe about 5 months, and then it switched over to the more common one, which I think it switched probably around December of 96, and then this one retired October of 97. So both of the no-shell versions are pretty uncommon, but this one is another where the Gen 3 is actually more common than the 4 just because of when it switched. And this one also had a pretty short runtime, so they're pretty good to look out for. And speaking of things that had a very short runtime with Gen 4, here's one of my most, one of my favorite ones in my collection. This is Bumble the Bee. Bumble was one of 6 beanies that retired on June of 1996. The other ones were Bronte, Rex, and Steg, the dinosaur trio, Caw the Crow, and Flutter the Butterfly. But of those 6, Bumble was the only one that ever got a Gen 4 tag. My guess is they didn't plan on retiring it at the time. They printed these out, then realized they were going to stop making it, and so they basically just kind of made one last set with these. So the Gen 4 version of this is actually really hard to come by, and is worth more than the Gen 3, but either way it's still kind of a valuable beanie to have. And I think we're getting close to the end of my noteworthy Gen 4s. Before I get into a couple more comparison ones, just for reference here is Princess, which we've talked about at great length. You always want to check the tush tag on Princess, because I don't know if the glare in the focus is going to allow you to see here, but yeah, this one's PVC pellets, worth more than the PE. And inside the hang tag, the last line, there's no space. The common version of this has a big space between the last, the 4 lines at the bottom here. So those are basically the things to look for, and also, like I mentioned before, the ones that are made in Indonesia or have a Canadian tag are more rare in this case. I don't have that one, but PVC is the main thing for this beanie. And then here is Maple, the Canadian bear. Maple was kind of hard to come by at first. It eventually became more common as time went on, but the noteworthy thing I have about this one is I actually have the version with the Special Olympics tag. These were given out at the Special Olympics, as you would guess. Not a huge amount of them made. I think it was about 15,000, something like that. So it's like, it's not super rare, but it was not the version sold in stores, and there's not a massive amount of them out there, so it's kind of interesting. But there is a version of Maple that is even more special than this one, and this is basically the gem of my collection. This is Pride Maple. I'll show the authentication on there just so you can see it. This one you should actually be able to see in the camera. The tush tag on this one says Pride. When they first released this beanie, that was apparently going to be its original name, and then they kind of changed it last minute, and the very first batch of these ever released says Pride instead of Maple on it. This is quite hard to come by. You don't usually see these on eBay for less than $100, so if you have a Maple, definitely check if it's a Pride, because if you do, then you're sitting on something good. Unfortunately, this one does kind of have the fading on the star. There's some creasing on it. It's not in perfect condition, but it's still a cool thing to have. And hopefully wrapping up the Gen 4s here, and getting close to wrapping up everything, is going to be Magic the Dragon. And this one is really hard to talk about, because it is extremely subjective. So I've got 3 of these, and this is the one that seems to be kind of the common one. The lighting is definitely going to be a problem here, but I'm hoping that it'll be kind of visible. So let me find the best angle where you can see these. The thing to look for on Magic is the color used for the stitching on the wings. So this one is the one I have that's the lightest. I think there's actually versions of this that are even lighter than that. It's basically kind of the same color as the wings itself. And it's also worth noting this one has the tag attached to the wing. My other 2 have the tag attached to the ear. These are both older ones. They have that, and then they also have the tush tag that says Sufferus or Sufferus. This one in particular also has the version with no website on the bottom. It's not even covered by a sticker. It's just not on there at all. I bought this one thinking it was the rare version, but it's not. And this one actually is. The difference is extremely slight. Remember, you're not looking at the wings, you're looking at the color of stitching on the wings, and I can barely tell the difference in the camera here. But yeah, like I said, there's kind of different shades with these, and the hot pink one is the rare one. The closer it is to like red, basically just a very bright pink, like that's kind of what you're looking for. Like I said, when I found this one online, the pictures made it look like it was hot pink. It was being sold as hot pink. It had the tag with no URL and the Sufferus error, so I figured it's an older one. It probably is the hot pink. I had it looked at by the experts. They said it wasn't, so I ended up getting this one. You can also, I don't know if the camera will really show it, but the stitching on like the little spine bits also kind of have the hot pink showing. Apparently not all of them are like this. So if you have a magic and you think it might be the hot pink version, you might want to take pictures and show someone who knows more about it, because it's really hard to tell. But it actually does make a difference. Hot pink magic is actually one of the most expensive ones I have. These usually go for about $50. So it's such a small, stupid change, but it does matter. And kind of wrapping this up then, here's the Gen 5s that I have that are actually worth a decent amount. Starting off with the one that is the least, here we have Germania, obviously the German bear. Reason I have two of these is because the original version of it, the back of the tag is in the usual English, but then the inside of it, the poem is in German, but they the word here for birthday, they actually spelled wrong. It's supposed to be Geburtstag with a second T after the S. And so, I'll put the protector back on later. They made a second version later where the back is in German. And then the inside, the type's a lot smaller also for some reason, but they corrected that typo. So the English version is harder to come by and is worth a little bit more, but it's nothing too huge. I think I got mine for less than $5, honestly, but depending on who you find, like if you find someone who wants it to fill out their collection or something, you can maybe sell it for a bit more. Then we have another country exclusive. Here is Britannia. I told you I'd eventually get to this one. Can you spot the difference? It's not the tag on this one, it is the flag. This is the common version. Just like the other country bears, it's just kind of placed straight onto the body. This is the patch version. You'll notice on the tush tag it says, if the camera will show it properly, which it probably won't, get this glare out of the way. This one is made in Indonesia. The most common beanies are in China. You can also find them in Indonesia or Korea. Usually doesn't matter, but sometimes it can. But the Indonesian version has this patch flag where basically it was made separately and then sewn onto the beanie, sometimes very poorly. You'll notice this one is lower on the body than the other flag, and it's at kind of like a weird angle. They did kind of a bad job with it. Stuff like this was actually part of the reason why they stopped making them in Indonesia. Thai didn't like the quality of these. So the version with the patch flag is actually, I believe there was only one shipment of those ever made. It might be more than that, but that's what I've heard at least. And lastly, where is my other, what is the other Gen 5? Oh yeah, here it is. This one's so unassuming. This is Spinner the Spider. Spinner is not rare. I'm going to get that out of the way right now. This was a beanie introduced towards the end of Gen 4, and it basically ran for about a year. The reason that this one is special is because it is called Creepy. But only the tush tag. The regular tag, or like the hang tag, still says Spinner. And this is exclusive to the Gen 5 version. This was something where they were probably going to change the name, like they did from Doodle to Strut and a few other things, but they ended up just not doing it. And so there's a limited number of these that say Creepy. That's honestly about it. The other Gen 5s that are noteworthy are the employee exclusives, and I certainly don't have those. Like Billionaire Bear, Number 1 Bear, Billionaire 2. Released during the Gen 4 period, there was one that's just usually known as Employee Bear. It's basically a Teddy New Face Violet with no hang tag. Some have a green ribbon, some have red. Those are definitely expensive because there was like only 150 of each made. But I don't have those, obviously. But like I said, the goal of this wasn't necessarily for me to just show off what I had, because I mean I don't have anything that majorly impressive, but like I said, if you have a collection and you happen to have any of these, then these are good ones to look for. If you have anything with the older tags, then great, those are always worth something. But if you don't, then unfortunately your collection is probably worth about $3 to $5 for each beanie, and you can still find people who are looking for them, but you're not going to get a whole lot. And just to stress again, if you have anything later than Gen 5, you still might have something good, but I'm not the person to talk to. Definitely check out the price guide if you need to, or just search eBay, look for sold items, and hopefully that'll help out. But I've talked for far too long, so that will be all.